All right, are we live?
And we should be live.
All right, okay. This is exciting. So welcome everyone in our audience to the second Lucid deep dive of the series. The first one was on Wild. You can find it uploaded on a different channel, the Dream Cafe Guides channel. But this one we're uploading using the Dream Dojo channel. So today the topic is the fundamentals of lucid dreaming. So when you boil down lucid dreaming, what does it come down to? What constitutes a lucid dream? What are the necessary things needed to have a lucid dream and become consistent in lucid dreaming? I'm hearing my own echo. That was a bit silly. Anyway, so today we have an amazing panel of people. We have, I'm going to just read from the right. We have DJ, MZ, Voidway, otherwise known as Philip, Liam, myself, Red, Mars, Amina, and Night Owl. So we have an absolutely amazing range of people and perspectives on this interesting topic, which I know for certain, because I've already looked at debates that have happened on this, that we can talk for ages on this. But we're only going to talk for like maybe around an hour is what we usually do before we move on to a Q&A. So we all have that to look forward to. Everyone is able to talk in the YouTube live stream chat. Feel free to share the link with everyone. We already did Everyone Paints, I know, on both Dream Cafe and OmniLucid Discord service. And so that being said, everyone be nice to each other in the chat, I suppose. Everyone have fun, enjoy themselves, enjoy the debate, enjoy the casual discussion of this really interesting topic. I'd just like to say this isn't really for totally for beginners. We're not going to teach you how to lucid dream. We're just going to talk about sort of the fundamentals and, a lot of the concepts behind of it and different opinions. So that being said, we may let the topic begin. Anyone who wants to talk and start off with your opinions, I'll present a pretty basic question of what do you think are the fundamentals of lucid dreaming, and then see where things go on from there. So who would like to start? I know DJ said that he might want to start if you want to.
Yeah, sure.
Amina.
Can you all hear me?
Okay. You can go ahead.
Okay. Well, I'll go ahead and be the guinea pig here, and we'll see how it goes. So my opinion on what are the fundamentals of, or the foundations of lucidity. I think one of the obvious things would be that it all revolves around awareness. I've put together lists before of what the fundamentals are, but I think the number one is awareness. So without going into a whole bunch of detail, I think whatever you're doing, it's kind of connecting your awareness within your memory. So like Stephen LeBerge talked about how memory is fundamental. That's how he came up with the mild technique. And so I kind of like to see things from a broad perspective and then try to narrow it down. And so I guess everything could fit within awareness in my mind, where your intention could be an awareness of right now versus later in time when you're intending to do something, and so on. But it's kind of hard to see lucidity from that point, because lucidity is such a raw experience. And so bringing that to an actual experience, I think, is kind of the big thing with lucidity. So in short, that would be my view.
All right, thank you so much for sharing. MZ, I know you wanted to speak. Do you have anything to add to this, your own opinion, perspective?
Oh, for sure. I think DJ's right on the money when he says that awareness is central to kind of lucid dreaming as a whole. But from a teaching perspective, I think a lot of us can agree it's very hard to teach awareness. So for me, when I think about the fundamentals, I think about what can we like effectively teach folks that are going to um, end up, allowing them to easily find a path towards lucidity. And I think to get there, um, you all kind of know I've advocated for these ideas, but criticality, awareness, memory, and presence. I know there's some contention with presence. I'm hoping to kind of get into why I think that should be separate from awareness, even though it is itself a kind of awareness later on in the conversation, but that's where I'm sitting right now.
All right, thank you. Red, are you interested in bringing up what you're interested in bringing up regarding belief? Or does someone else want to? Oh, all right, you can go ahead if you want to.
Yeah, so we got a comment from someone that asked, what do you think about belief being the core of a dream? Like whatever you currently believe will be. And I mean, my view on it is that, I don't know, a lot of this stuff just comes to how you define words, honestly. Because, like, I feel like, it ends up going all back to schema or whatever, but belief, I feel like there's like two ways to see it. There's like the immediate conscious belief and like a type of expectation also falls into that, but like a type of expectation that you don't consciously think of. Like with people bringing up the example of like if a monster is chasing in a dream, it can, keep chasing you and attacking you. But if you try to be friendly, it can respond in a friendly way. And your conscious thought might think there's no way it would respond kindly, but somewhere in your mind, it understands that if you speak kindly to someone, they will respond kindly. So there's like, I guess, layers to belief like that, or expectations. So that's my view on it.
Great, amazing, thanks for sharing. Who else would like to jump in? Who hasn't spoken yet, or? Amina, you can go ahead if you want to.
Sure. I agree with what has been said so far. I think awareness is a big one that can apply to anybody. And I also say a lot that kind of like having a personal dream work practice is a foundation. And the reason I say that is because, as we know, different things work for different people. And it's very hard to say, like, oh, this applies to everybody when it comes to lucid dreaming. Other than like awareness is really one thing that I can say really could help anybody when it comes to lucid dreaming. So my main things would be that awareness and building your own practice.
Great. By the way, welcome, Skyfall. You're only a few minutes late. We're just starting off with
I just
expressing our
checking.
envies.
I'll be available until close to 7, so you guys have me for a little bit. Good evening, everyone.
All right.
Sweet.
Good evening. Nice to have you with us, definitely. Would anyone else like to jump in, or like jump in relation to what other people have said? Or I know Mars and Philip, neither of you have spoken yet. If you are interested in voicing your opinions, Liam as well, you haven't, but
yeah. I think it's hard to summarize what I think are the fundamentals at this point. I'm coming back to lucid dreaming after like a year break, and when I was first doing this, I was like obsessed with awareness, and I found this kind of way to be lucid during the day that was how I got, my lucid dreams, was like this very specific day work involving awareness. And coming back to it, I actually think that memory is everything, possibly. And that awareness that I was practicing was a way that I was using like intent and like a mild, I guess, kind of in a way. So I don't know. I'm on the fence. My views have been changing, so this conversation is a little exciting to me to see what comes up.
Thanks. So I know that the idea of memory being behind everything is something which Sensei, I believe, is sort of an idea that he likes to push. However, he unfortunately couldn't be here today. But what do other people think about this idea that Mars brings up about memory? And do people have any other alternative opinions that they're feeling right now?
Yeah.
So far?
So I kind of think that there are a few things there. I think there are subsets. I think there are fundamental things and they're like foundational things that go along with them, kind of things that are important and sort of necessary. I do think memory is critically important. I think there are, perspective memory, whether you're trying to remember to do something in the future via intention, dream recall, which is foundational for lucid dreaming, and honestly, its own thing worth emphasizing just because of how important it is. Being able to remember your dreams, being able to remember goals or ideas or plans, I think that's really important. I don't agree that memory and awareness are the same thing. And like I kind of disagree with Sensei's take just a little bit here in terms of like memory and awareness being the same thing and like just being an aspect of memory. I think there is like a distinctness there between remembering a goal, remembering to do something, and what classifies memory, and you sort of being aware of your experience, being aware of what you're thinking, critical thinking, observing and understanding what it is that you're experiencing and how you're experiencing it and why you're doing things. I do think those are kind of separate in their own way. I think it all comes down to how do you define memory, and I think some people define it more expansively than others. And that definitional thing is where we kind of get stuck up in terms of the discussion. Is some people define memory in a very broad and expansive way that encompasses everything, and not everyone does. And so I think that's where some of the disagreement would come in on that subject.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Sounds great. Thanks for that input. MZ, do you want to go ahead?
Yeah, I kind of see where Sensei is coming from with this topic. When you get down to it, everything that you experience can be tied back to memory. Even what you're seeing right now is like a constructive process that your brain is doing to kind of pull information together that you've learned and experienced over time into something coherent that you can interact with. I don't think that there is, when you get down to things, a true separation between memory and awareness. Memory is necessarily constructive. You are using processes to access information and arrange them in a way that produces some effect or result based on some other trigger. So when you get down to it, it's all memory. I don't know if that's useful. I don't know if we can just say, oh, everything is memory. It really comes back to Red's kind of idea of how do we break up and define terms, right? Like what language are we using to talk about this? And for me, I like coming at it from like a useful standpoint. And I don't know if it's useful to say that memory is everything, even if it's probably true.
I agree.
All right. Yeah. Nightowl, do you want to jump in with that?
Yeah, I really think, again, to mention, I think it was Red's comment about language and defining terms. Really, the way we're able to do that is through association, right? So I guess you could also classify association as a type of memory. But I'm going to take a slightly different approach and use a mnemonic for what I think are the three most fundamental concepts. Sorry about the music, guys. So they all start with the letter M, which is fitting for a mnemonic, hopefully easy enough to remember as well. So I actually chose my three straight from LaBerge's Exploring the World of Lucid Dreaming. And I really tried to distill what I thought was his main message. And for me, that was first and foremost motivation. Because if you don't have the motivation to do it, you're not going to see it through. It's a ongoing process, perhaps a lifelong skill. I think it's always worth starting with why and really sort of using that to inspire you through the entire process. And then number two would be memory for me. Once you figure out your why, remembering what you're doing and why is also important. And developing your memory, like Skyfall would say, in terms of your dream recall, is the cornerstone of lucidity. And then last but not least, I'm going to address the criticality factor many of you have mentioned and say mindfulness would be my third M for mind mnemonic device. And that's sort of lends itself to awareness, presence, critical state testing, and that's my little memory technique.
Great, thanks. Red, do you have something to add?
Well, when we're thinking about memory and awareness, I guess, if we're considering prospective memory, like memory of the future, then I guess we could say that awareness is like current memory, which, yeah, a whole definition thing, because normally I wouldn't consider it the same thing. Like, I would consider awareness like closer to like criticality than memory, like in the way that most, most of what I see as like the opposite of awareness is almost like autopilot, of you are there, just not really critical. So I consider it closer to criticality than memory, but I see the connection there.
DJ, you can go ahead.
Cool. So the way I look at memory is kind of like an awareness within time. And I might look at other aspects of awareness, like awareness in space, awareness of your body, awareness of your inner self, inner states. In terms of memory, like I think you can look at a certain aspect of lucid dreaming as primary, and you can focus on it for yourself, and it'll work. So it's one thing I really liked what Amina said about practice, because you'll practice something and you might practice one aspect of lucid dreaming to the point where it really works for you. Let's say you're practicing dream recall, you're practicing your perspective memory triggers and mild and all that. And if you practice mild the way LaBerge lays it out in his book, and you do it faithfully on a daily basis, I have a hard, I feel like that just gives you really high chances. But the motivation, the intention, the confidence in the technique, all of that starts tying together in such a way that if you're actually practicing it the way it should be practiced, it's going to take a lot of effort and take a lot of time and energy. And all of these things start to kind of create this feedback loop with one another that kind of supports each other. So whatever you might think is the primary thing, I think actually it depends on the person. There's there's particular aspects that are going to work better for somebody, than other aspects. The issue is like, how do you figure out what works best for you? And it's practice. So we can talk about concepts, and it's really helpful to do that. But at the end of the day, it's really about practice. But just on the memory question, I think to me, like I said before, I try to break everything down into things that can connect with everything else. I see memory as like a web in time. And then you're attaching things. Like a mnemonic is like, packaged information, and you're attaching your intention to be lucid and a mild. I think memory is almost like maybe metaphorically it could be like the nervous system or the highway, or what carries these other aspects of lucidity.
Amazing, thank you. Next we can have Liam. I want to hear your voice too.
Yeah. So I'm gonna have a maybe interesting take. Maybe it's gonna be garbage, but I think a lot of the act of lucid dreaming entails is also the processing of memories and information. So have a memory, but also process it correctly. and act accordingly. So take that as you want, but this is my take on the subject.
Great, thanks. Void, you can go ahead if you want.
Yeah, so I have a pretty similar opinion on memory as DJ. Memory I've always considered to be sort of just linked to concepts like mnemonics, well, awareness practices. It's just I've always kind of considered it as like being how do you term it? Like considering kind of the future aspects of it, I'd say more than the present, which no, I don't really have much else on that. I was just kind of emphasizing.
Yeah, that's great. Thanks. Mars, go ahead.
I feel like criticality and memory are the exact same thing. And criticality is like huge for becoming lucid because you're having that moment of like, oh, I don't go to school anymore. But in order to know that, you have to remember that. You have to remember who you are. You have to look around and be like, oh shit, I don't know that person. That's not really my aunt. And that's all connected to your memory. I was so fixated on awareness for so long, but I feel like it's like you're teaching someone how to juggle, and you keep telling them about like gravity, and it's like so important to juggling. But who cares about gravity? Like it's behind the scenes. You're always aware in a dream. You just have to think about the contents a little bit more. Yeah.
I have just a really quick question, and then maybe Crystal can help me with this. So, is it fair to say that lucidity is awareness, or maybe should we start by defining lucidity? Is that redundant?
All right, yeah. We can present this question after MZ goes ahead first to sort of finish up on this round if we want to. MZ, you can go ahead now if you want to.
Okay, sure. Yeah, I just kind of wanted to build off of a little bit of what Mars was saying in regards to criticality. I was reading a research paper this morning, kind of in preparation for this whole meeting, and they used a term like error correction, essentially, where dream elements end up triggering a hey, this isn't quite right. Let me make up something using memory that kind of fits here. But in cases where folks end up lucid, there's this moment, this instance, as Mars was saying, of, okay, this isn't right. I've noticed this error. And I think that criticality element of being able to take the jump from one memory to another and having some process within there that you're building up over time is really crucial in allowing you to break out of that automatic error correction that occurs within dreams when two elements seem very out of place from one to the other. And that seems like something like important, foundational even, that's worth considering and thinking about a bit further.
Yeah, that's great. Thanks. Does anyone want to add anything to what MZ is saying, or sort of go more into the question of?
Yes, absolutely.
Oh, sure, Dora.
Because I've been itching to say this for a while now, but I still disagree that memory is everything. I think it's important. I think it's really useful. I think it connects to a lot of different things. But I think reducing everything to memory does take away from the differences between different aspects. Like when Mars is saying criticality is memory, criticality is a way of thinking. It is a way of analyzing, a way of accessing information, a way of resorting to information. Whereas memory in a sense involves just accessing that information and not really a quality statement as to what you do with the information per se. It's more about how you access it. One thing I think is really interesting to consider is that memory and awareness, I consider those to be different things. Awareness, being aware of something, memory being more remembering the thing, and memory being always necessarily a retrospective thing. Because in the present, say we're looking around and associating things with one another, we use our memory to find out what something is, to know what something is. It's because we've learned it in the past. Even when we set an intention with prospective memory, we decide to do something in the future, it's based on a past decision that we then remember. So even with prospective memory, even with like working memory, with looking around things, it's still retrospective in nature because we're analyzing things we observed in the past. And I think that is different from being just aware of the experience, which I think is its own quality, being aware of something, versus interpreting the experience, which is when you involve memory of things that you've associated with and understand the experience. I think those are different things. I think being aware of something and understanding it are a little different in that sense.
All right, thank you so much for your input. DJ, you can go right on ahead.
Yeah, so I wanted to address Night Owl's comment there. So defining lucidity. And, this is something that a lot of people smarter than me have done, are making currently attempts at doing, really amazing research. I know that there's a YouTube or not a YouTube, a Discord called Tech for Dreaming. They have some really great people on there. They're doing great research. I forget his first name, but the last name is Baird, Baird, and he is primarily responsible for a study called cognitive neuroscience of lucid dreams. So, there's people doing really great work digging into the causal stuff on lucidity, but and LaBerge did a lot of research like this in the 90s, and some great people have carried that on. Some German researchers are doing really great stuff. But everything that I've read basically comes down to like we don't know what lucidity is, why it, and what causes it, but we can create these kind of conceptual frameworks that help us experience it and explain it and share it, and kind of you can do all sorts of things from that point. So, at the end of the day, lucidity could be intentional, it could be unintentional. You could have some kind of memory or awareness. It could happen spontaneously, or you may not see the beginnings of it. But I think the common experience, at least in terms of lucidity, is a kind of contrast between what we might call unconscious and conscious, darkness and light. It's like you're kind of waking up. We have all these kind of metaphors for it, right? So I think when I think of lucidity, it's always like it's this contrast. I was there and now I'm here, and that allows me to know that I'm dreaming. And like all these words, you can go a number of different ways with them, but that's how I see it.
Amazing, thanks so much for that. Amina, you can go right ahead.
Just one quick thing for DJ. That's Dr. Benjamin Baird, actually.
Okay, great. Yeah, he's great.
Great, thanks, Steph. By the way, Steffel, we're writing in the chat of the StreamYard, in case you didn't know, to raise hands. Anyway, Amina, go ahead.
Yeah, just not much to add, but just kind of going off on that. I think that, so to define lucidity, obviously it's kind of complicated because it's a spectrum, right? So you might be a little bit lucid or kind of aware, and then the more of these what do you call them, the more of these qualities that you add on, you get further along the scale. So if you're fully lucid with the memory of the fact that, oh, this is not my grandma, or I'm not here and I'm actually asleep, in addition to the awareness and all the other things, the more of these qualities you accrue, you go up the scale of lucidity. So I think when defining lucidity, it's important to talk about that spectrum, and it is quite complicated, but actually Skyfall uses this metaphor that I really like of the dimmer switch, which makes sense to me when explaining that. So yeah, I don't know.
Great, thanks. MC, go ahead.
Yeah, I'd love to build off a bit of what Amina and DJ were saying. Like if you look at the studies that have kind of delved into what areas of the brain are active during lucidity and non-lucidity, um, while we can point to specific areas and say, okay, these are active, maybe they have these qualities or traits because we've associated them through other studies with other things. I think that's kind of missing the point, which DJ was getting at. Because when you get down to it, right, there's literally an expansion of consciousness. You go from a lower state of interconnectivity within brain regions, a lower amount of processing to a larger expanded processing, quite literally. And for me, I define consciousness as information in motion. So it's an interesting thought, an interesting idea, and I just wanted to share that with the class.
Thank you. Does anyone have any comments on that? Anyone want to jump in? I know Liam and Philip have not been talking too much. If you have anything to add, just any comments.
Sorry, I'm currently doing some guiding in a cafe.
I didn't quite hear you, and neither did the subtitles, I think.
I'm sorry, I'm currently doing a bit of guiding in Gym Cafe.
Okay. Have fun, have fun. All right, does anyone want to jump in with anything?
Sure.
Any comments?
Yeah.
Go ahead.
I like what Amina said about the levels. Well, what might be called levels of lucidity. Rhys Jones on YouTube popularized that concept there, and it's actually kind of a. So I got this book. Mars actually recommended it to me. It's called the SUNY Dream Reader, SUNY. It's like University in New York, and they basically compiled a bunch of writings and ideas about dreams back in the 90s, and they created what's called lucid dreaming criteria. So a number of people created their own frameworks for, like, the different levels of lucidity, and trying to get at what it is. I think the big challenge there is science at large is trying to figure out what consciousness is. And it really feels like, and seems like in my mind, that lucidity is completely wrapped up in that question of what consciousness is. And so we tend to move towards the experiential aspects of it and focus on particular techniques. And you get a whole bunch of community created techniques, all these different kind of techniques to try to get at it, because there's no like 100% proven method. So yeah, I like the idea of like expansion, the increase or decrease of light. But I think of LaBerge's experiments on acetylcholine, the studies on the prefrontal cortex, and there's a lot of correlations. But then you also have folks that are claiming, lucidity during non-REM. You have studies ongoing right now. Andrew Holacek is involved in some of these, where they're attempting to prove lucidity within a non-REM state. Be really interesting if that happened. So yeah, that just adds more questions, of course. So I like what everybody's saying, and the one thing I would say on levels of lucidity for anybody like who's just starting out, or really anybody, is oftentimes we don't recognize the lower levels, and kind of pass over them. They, like, whether it's something's weird or you're asking a question or whatever it may be, and and you don't necessarily need like full lucidity to have an enjoyable or a useful experience. Paul Foley was one of the advocates of like, he's a little bit extreme with it, where it's like he didn't. It's not a lucid unless you can do you have all of your waking memories and you're fully aware of your body. He had a very strict um, criteria. And there's another one that I know of, Ed Kellogg, and he's a little bit more on the fringe end of lucidity, but I like that kind of thing. And in terms of like paranormal stuff, but he created a really useful framework that goes from like sublucidity to you're like fully lucid, but you're not really controlling anything. And I think it's really important to be aware of all those aspects of lucidity, so that a lot of people just associate it with control. I know, like in the popular culture, lucid dreaming is just like it's all about control. Um, there's this new device called Halo, and on their site, it's like in the articles I was reading, it was like we want to control the dream, and like that's great, but I don't think that's really what lucidity is about. Um, anyway, before I ramble on too much more, that's some thoughts.
Thank you. Red, you can go ahead, and then afterwards, Strife.
All right. Like I think one thing to point out is that there's pretty much two lucidity, like words we're thinking of, or the first one that we mentioned of like comparing awareness to lucidity is like pretty much the Google definition of like, you're present, you can think, all that stuff. And then there's the other thing of lucid dreaming, where all it is knowing you are in a dream. And even though both of the words are lucid, it is possible to have lucidity as in all that presence and thinking. You can have that even in a non-lucid dream. Like if there's nothing wrong in a non-lucid dream, you're just not even going to realize that it's a dream. And in the same way, it's possible to not be lucid in a lucid dream in the way of knowing that it's a dream, but not doing anything with it, or knowing that it's fake, but not knowing that it's a dream. So, I mean, yeah, that's something worth pointing out.
Good point. Thanks so much. Stifle, you can go right ahead.
There we go. Thank you. Yeah, I've kind of heard this before, and I've gotten some sort of disagreements, debate, and discussion over this on Reddit. I've gotten some comments. It's sort of the Tholian sort of idea that you have to have what I tend to consider higher awareness, lucidity, having full access to your waking faculties. From what I've heard, Daniel Love, and now someone please verify this, but Daniel Love, I think, subscribes to sort of the same idea of like that Tholian definition, DJ, that you were just mentioning. And I've gotten to some discussion with this on what actually the definition is of lucidity. And I think, it is a spectrum. The dimmer switch analogy, like Amina brought up earlier that I'd use, basically there is a point where it's, there's a point before where it's not on, but there's a definite point where the switch is on or off. And then, it can vary in intensity. It can vary in what you have with it. And yeah, I always, push back against anyone who talks about, control being part of what it means to have a lucid dream. You see this all the time. And I think it's just a matter of our pop culture and our, modern media getting the definition wrong and just sort of running with it. Inception's got something to do with it. But just in general, people, it's what people want to do in a lucid dream. Typically, a lot of people want to control their dreams. And it's separating that from what it actually means to get lucid. And that's how you end up with all these questions, people saying, well, I was lucid, but why wasn't I able to do this? Or why wasn't I able to do that? And it's recognizing that control really is a separate skill. It's a learnable skill. It's a separate skill from getting lucid.
All right. Thank you for that. Night Owl, would you like to chip in?
Yeah, I think it goes back. I think that was a great comment, Skyfall. And just to reiterate what Amina said about the spectrum, right? There's a spectrum of lucidity, a spectrum of control, and the two are definitely not the same thing. However, I feel as though if we're getting back to Amina's original comment about implementing your own practice, you should sort of think of them together, hand in hand. It depends on your goal, really, but The common misconception that lucidity means control is definitely not true for me, because what got me into lucid dreaming was a lucid nightmare. So I can tell you firsthand that I felt, no sense of control. Uh, it was somewhat of a sleep paralysis incident that really shook me to my core and drove me to learn more. So, what I was thinking was that I think LaBerge mentioned something along the lines of incubation in order to increase criticality. And what I mean by that is sort of planting the seed to have a specific dream and imagining it so that if you were to be successful at planting that seed and in fact having that experience, even if you weren't lucid, it would be so ridiculous, essentially, that you would recognize, for one, yes, this is what I intended to dream about. So that in and of itself could increase criticality. But two, I'm flying, I'm, on top of, this great mountain, and there's all these, physical elements that couldn't be true in real life. So that's sort of like what he touched on with incubation to increase criticality. And I actually wanted to touch on control in order to increase lucidity. So I think Skyfall and I have had our fair share of disagreements, and oftentimes they boil down to semantics, honestly. But he's right. The terms we use matter, and the definitions we agree upon what further our understanding. But for me, when I perform a critical state test or reality check, whatever you want to call it, I always implement an aspect of control. And I think this might be a really good concept we could debate here openly with all of us about how exactly you perform a critical state test, because I know many of us may not even need to anymore because we've become so advanced in our practice. However, it may very well be good for beginners listening, or just anybody who may not have a full grasp of how it's done properly or what that means for you. So let me just explain really briefly what I do. If I were to perform a critical state test, I want to use something reliable. And from my understanding, that's going to be breathing, for one, because you're always breathing, whether you're asleep and lucid, or just having a regular dream, you're still breathing without the presence of a physical body. So I personally like that one a lot. I used to like my hands until one time I looked down and I didn't have any hands. I felt the motion of me lifting up, looking at my hands, but they weren't there. It was very disembodying, which took some time to, sorry about the background noise, which took some time to become comfortable with. But I'll walk you through it really quickly, what I do for a state test. So if I'm going to pretend to breathe, and I pinch my nose, and, I'm really trying hard to breathe, I want to perform the state test, and maybe even a second one like my hands, just to confirm. But LaBerge himself mentions, just imagine what it would be like if you were actually dreaming. And I think it's that assumption that leads people astray when they're performing the critical state test. They rush through it, they assume that they're awake, even while they're dreaming. And if we sort of approach it, the other way around, and we imagine we're dreaming, and we imagine what it would be like if I could just breathe fine with a pinched nose, or I imagine what it would be like if I push my fingers through my palm. I really feel the skin stretching. And that's sort of practicing an element of visualization and also encouraging you to build control. I wanted to, see what you guys thought about that approach.
Great, yeah, thanks a lot. I mean, I think we could definitely go into sort of more stuff to do with either control or state tests, but that's sort of a different topic than what we're going on today. I also wanted to add, on a personal note, I know I didn't raise my own hand, but I haven't talked yet, so I'd just like to say that in my personal belief, all lucid dreaming techniques are incubation. So incubating criticality is just a part of lucid dreaming techniques, all lucid dreaming techniques. So, I mean, it depends on your definition of incubation, technically, but what I've learned a long time ago and what I believed for a while now is that, everything has an aspect of incubation. So I guess you could say that that's sort of a fundamental, but not really in my personal opinion, because what I see as fundamentals are things like awareness and criticality, not how you get these fundamentals into the dreams, which can be, well, which will end up being in some way incubation, but like I wouldn't see the method as one of the fundamentals. Anyway.
So just to interject really quick, sorry, I just wanted to say I think critical state tests, specifically the term reality checks, are fundamental. A lot of people actually believe that's the cornerstone of their approach. So I would argue that while you can use incubation to perform a reality check within a dream, the critical factor of practicing reality checks, truly trying to exert control in a way that the real waking life world will not allow, is the practice, the real value of the practice, not necessarily the incubation, because I find that to be more rare, and I think that's why more advanced dreamers stray away from it.
All right, then. Thanks for the interjection, I suppose. I mean, I still don't really see specific actions or ideas of state tests as fundamental, because it's really just the thing that it would, well, you can do it if you want, but it would just really be specifically like the criticality and awareness that you need to get to the state where you even consider doing it. However, that can also be related to memory. I'm just mentioning that because I want to stay completely neutral on the specific question of whether or not stuff is to do with memory, because I honestly have no idea. Especially when we started talking about how this relates to chess. In a different scenario, I remember there was a large discussion on it. Yeah, pretty cool. Anyway. So, MZ, do you want to go ahead and interject here if it's specifically on topic?
Yes, specifically on topic.
And then I'll go ahead and get back to everyone else too. Yeah.
Yeah. Sorry. So, the problem that I have with the idea of state checks, reality testing being fundamental is from a purely objective standpoint. There's been studies done on efficacies of specific approaches and techniques and methods of lucid dreaming, and over a 2-week period, just doing reality checks alone resulted in no increase in lucid dreams at all. So it's a dubious idea. But that said, the core notion of changing your critical process when certain events or certain kind of error corrections occur, so let's say noticing specific dream signs, setting that intent, it does seem to play a role in actually getting lucid, according to a bunch of stuff that we've seen throughout the literature. That said, I don't know if reality checks, state testing alone is the way to go about that. I think there's some deeper things happening that might be better for folks to focus on. And I know this goes against common wisdom, but I typically tend to avoid telling people to do reality tests and state checks, because there's other things that they can be working on that achieve the same kind of results much more quickly.
All right, thank you, MZ, for that. Now let's get back to the people who raised their hands before. Mars, I believe you were the first person. You can go right ahead.
I raised my hand so long ago. I think it was actually in response to Amina, and I just wanted to put out some experiences that I had with the spectrum of lucidity, because I've, in chat when I'm teaching lucidity to other people, I always say, if you're dreaming, that's all that you need to define that you're lucid. But I know for myself, I actually don't even use that as a scale. I have my own personal scale, because the experience is so specific that I've had dreams where I want to say my dream self, I go, oh my God, this is a dream. Be lucid. And I'm screaming at myself, I'm lucid, be lucid, wake up. And I can't make that switch happen. And it's not a switch of presence or anything like quantifiable. It's just being lucid. And I've had a lot of what I call false lucids where I'm like, oh, I'm lucid and I'm doing crazy shit. And I wake up and I was like, oh, it was a dream the whole time. And then I also have lucids where I know I'm dreaming, but on such a small level. And it is almost the exact same as when I am having a false lucid, but there's just this strange quality that's so different. So what it means to be lucid, I guess it could really depend on your own personal experiences. These things are all super personal. Had a bunch to say on the reality check stuff too, but I'll let other people speak since this was a comment from way before.
All right, then, sure. Thanks so much. Next, we have Philip. We want to hear more of your voice.
Yes, so this was also in response to what Amina and Night Owl were talking about earlier. That kind of stuff, I definitely think it's a balance in neurological activity while getting lucid. I mean, you have other mental deficits that can happen that slow down your ability to think straight. And I think being in a dream is kind of similar. You start out with some kind of idea, and with time and experience, you get more and more lucid, more and more vivid, and more awake from like with that idea. At a point, it seems like you have to manage that as to not like overdo it and wake up. Hence, well, why people practice stuff like stabilization or grounding. It has you balance that kind of neurological activity. I feel like. As for your incubation comment, Crystal, I'd say I disagree. A large majority of dial techniques are incubation based. However, I believe Night Owl did a good job explaining dial techniques that are more based on state testing and awareness. While techniques, on the other hand, I don't see involving incubation at all. I've always considered it, straight, direct. You can do wild techniques without the planning and the thought that most incubation based techniques use beforehand. But that's just my opinion.
All right, thank you. I'll get back to you when it's my turn. Right. Okay, DJ, you're next in the order.
Yeah.
Go
So
ahead.
I wanted to respond to Night Owl's question and then your comment on incubation as well. And it's funny because this is something Sensei, aka Brandon, and I've debated a little bit in the Omni Lucid Discord. Basically, he started his kind of foray into dreaming through a lot of incubation and wanting certain kinds of dreams, and so he made those certain kinds of dreams happen, but there wasn't any lucidity going on. So I think a lot of what we're doing could be seen as incubation. I think it could actually be a really good place to start for somebody who's just starting out, and not even to focus on lucid dreaming itself, but focus on the kinds of dreams that you want to have. The assumption is for lucid dreaming that, well, I get lucid and then I control the dream and make it do what I want. But you can control your dreams from your waking state. You don't need to be lucid to do that. It takes time, takes effort, and all that. But I think that's really important for beginners. I think it's important not to set too high a threshold for the experience and for somebody to enjoy their dreams. I think that can lead to burnout a lot. I think it's important to lower the threshold as much as possible, so that people have a broader understanding of the experience and are able to access it in their own way. They shouldn't be, it's really useful to follow techniques and all that, but at the end of the day, you have to figure out your own way. And then in terms of Night Owl's comment about imagining you're dreaming, or I believe that's what it was, and that's something that I've worked on quite a bit, and it also applies to reality checks because it's kind of a sort of reality check or state test. in that you are taking time during your day to activate some kind of self-awareness. And so we all know about day residue. We all know that what happens in the daytime goes into our dreams. Reality checks are, by the community, long-standing technique, tried and true. The question is, how are you practicing them? And I think a lot of people just try to go for quantity over quality on reality checks and think of it more like a mechanism rather than a holistic mindset. So it's like, okay, I'm going to push my finger through my hand and then I'm going to do that in my dream and I'm going to realize it. Well, I, me for one, I've tried not every reality check out there, but a lot of them, and they worked. Most of them worked once and then they didn't work again. So, eventually I devised a way to figure out, okay, what's going on underneath that? What's happening there? And I came up with, things that I would try that are new. There's some kind of novelty aspect to it, some kind of positive confidence that you get from, oh, this is the answer. Like you come across something new, it's like, oh, I didn't know that before. That must be it. Whatever's going on there, there's an effect of the newness of it. But there's a quality to reality checks. And I think the core of reality checks is questioning whether or not you're dreaming. And so kind of for me, it logically follows that I could imagine myself in a dream and kind of see the contrast between what a dream is like and what waking life is like. It's not saying waking life is fake or waking life is I'm dreaming right now. Again, it comes back to definitions a little bit, but it's the aspect of reflecting on, activating some kind of self-reflectiveness to become aware of the contrast between waking and dreaming.
Thanks so much, DJ, for that. Stifle, you're next. Go right ahead with all of your points.
All right. So to state testing. So by the way, DJ used the term reality check the whole time. I honestly don't know where that term came from. I just know that it's wrong. Just because I actually heard a really good explanation from this. And it was one of the things I heard when I was at the International Dream Conference back in 2022, the one in Tucson, not the one in Ashland, because I couldn't go to that one. But back there, it was a speech that Dr. LaBerge was given. There was a clip of it that was recently uploaded, I want to say a month and a half, maybe a month ago, to Dr. Kristen Lamarca's YouTube channel. And it's Dr. LaBerge discussing why the term reality test or state test is used rather than reality check. And there's a specific reason. It's because you're testing reality. You're kind of testing the experience that you're in. You're looking to know if you're in a dream or not. Versus, sort of the reality check terminology is, I don't know where that came from, but that's just kind of thing that got popularized. Don't know how, but it's not the official term. Anyway, that's just a bugaboo on my part. Anyway, the more critical point I have is that state testing itself, most state tests, you're talking about how most of them, DJ, would fail like once. Most of them work off of dream control, and dream control can fail. And so just about a majority of the physical kind of tests can fail. Honestly, the memory retracing and mental state testing is the way to go in my mind in terms of examining, just critically thinking about your memory since you last thought you woke up, looking at for anything out of place in any way, looking for something that doesn't make any sense, examining your environment, looking for the same thing. That kind of thing, to me, is a better state test than trying to do some sort of physical action that mostly just works off of dream control, with just a couple exceptions. But the mileage does vary from person to person on that. But critically thinking, the point of state test is criticality, critically thinking, being mindfully aware, presently aware. A mindless state test is a useless state test in my mind. And I do not see state tests as critical or necessary, because I've seen state tests become a crutch. They can be over relied upon. People automatically jump to state testing instead of learning to gain confidence in their own lucidity, learning to recognize dream signs. It's like, oh, I see that there is a alien spaceship sitting out in the yard. Let me do a state test because I could potentially be awake, but I just need to double check real quick. So there are some like really absurd situations, and people like there was one on Reddit yesterday, I think, or 2 days ago, and someone was talking about, they're doing state tests and they got a successful result, but they completely weren't aware of it and they just weren't even noticing. And it was like they reported that their dream, the bed was at a 90-degree angle in a false awakening. There's some pretty clear dream signs. So I think over time, I consider state tests like training wheels on a bike. They can be good to learn, especially for someone who is new to it, especially when done correctly. But I don't can see them as a long-term practice. I see them sort of like a training thing. I see them as a supplement to practices. They're not a standalone technique. They're not something you just do by itself and just that's all you do for lucid dreaming. I see them as something that can be beneficial to beginners in particular, but something that can also become a crutch if over relied upon, something that can cause people to question their lucidity and doubt their own lucidity, and could ultimately prove harmful in some situations to someone's lucidity if they're questioning it too much and not actually gaining confidence in that lucidity.
Thank you, Skyfall. Before we continue, I'd just like to mention that we are 2 minutes technically over time. Usually what we do is we have a 1 hour segment of like sort of discussion or presentation and then a 1 hour Q&A. But I'm going to let us go over time, just see how long this goes because, this is a really interesting topic. I know we're all still talking about it and it's fun. We'll still try and get the Q&A in at the end. I don't know, how that's going to turn out, but we'll play it by ear. Next, I raised my hand, so it's my turn, I guess. I wanted to comment on what Philip said about, he said, the majority of dial techniques aren't in incubation, and he doesn't see wild as incubation at all. So I'd just like to clarify what I was getting at. Basically, I don't remember who I heard this from. It might have been Sensei, but I just don't really know. It was a long time ago. So I'm of the opinion that every single technique is incubation because it's incubating in some way. Like this is bending the definition of the word. Might have been Homer's. I don't really know. So it's bending the definition of incubation essentially, because usually when you think of the word incubation, you think of doing a specific practice to try to like get a specific dream or dream scene or like a dream sign into your dream. But what I'm thinking of, by the way, Philip, I'm not saying that you did think of that, and I'm just saying, that's what tends to be thought of. But what I'm saying is you're incubating the idea itself and like the lucidity itself. So you're basically incubating the awareness. So obviously, in order for any technique to work, that will have to incubate the awareness into your dream in some way. So for wild is incubating your awareness from waking state into dreaming state without losing your awareness at all. That's basically the way it was described. And then dial techniques use forms of incubation by I think I explained this like a long time ago too. I think it might have been Craftio, who's on Dream Cafe, and I think Sensei backed me up on this one. I sort of mentioned how I think that mild as well as other dial techniques all sort of are related to incubation because you're doing something to put this idea of lucidity into your mind in the dream, which causes you to become lucid in some way, or this idea of like awareness or criticality or whatever you're going to call it, like heightened memory, whatever. So it does have that idea of incubation. So I think most of the disagreement here just comes from the definition of incubation, and that could be like definitely a debate in itself. But like incubation, when it comes down to it, I'm seeing it as like putting any idea whatsoever into your dream. Also on the topic of not using physical state tests, I definitely agree that like physical state tests are. I just want to say, like, on a personal level, I have never done it before in a dream. And when I was lucid dreaming kind of quite consistently with SSILD, I was my awareness would just kind of creep up on me, and there would be no moment of realization. There was no like, oh, I might be dreaming. There was no like specific, this seems a bit odd. There was not even that. It was just like, oh yeah, I'm dreaming and I've known it for a while, was sometimes something which would go through my head. So that was kind of funny. Except it's like it rose slowly, and there was definitely never any need for a state test. It was just a knowledge that appeared. So I think the whole idea of state tests being necessary in general, to me, doesn't really make sense, because it's just the awareness and the criticality and like all of that essentially is what's coming into play, especially in my specific case. So I just wanted to go over that quickly in response to people who have WeNets. I believe we have Mars raised their hand next, so you can go ahead.
Yeah, with like a bunch of rambly thoughts in my head about reality checks. I also have never done one in real life, like a physical test. I've done them in dreams and have had them fail, just because people talk about them all the time, you know. So I've like tried, and they don't work, or they do, and I've not gotten lucid from them. I do what I would call a reality check or test. I call it a state test. And that's pretty much the fundamentals of my entire practice, actually. I think my initial comment that I wanted to say actually was in relation to something DJ said, which is, I feel like you have to have a dream that's, you wake up and you're like, oh my God, that was real life. It was so real. How could a dream ever be it was just like this. It was just like reality. And then you know for sure, anytime you could be dreaming. Because if you don't have that experience, you're like, well, this is obviously not a dream. I'm in my house. I'm doing the things I always do. And while that could be true, knowing how richly a dream replicates your experience of reality gives you that opportunity to say, no, well, this is quite real, and my dreams are also quite real, so this could be a dream. And having that initial dream made my state checks easy, because I do them in the sense, I think it was Night Owl said, I assume that I'm dreaming. I just start off the bat. I'm like, I make myself into a dream, which I was reading about like the Tibetan yogas and that kind of the sleep yoga, dream yoga, and I guess it's kind of like illusory form. Like that's kind of the practice where I'm like, oh, I'm in a dream right now. And like DJ said, I'm not like saying that reality and dreams are like they're nothing, or like reality is, it's not that they're one for one, but they're both states. They're two possible states that you could be in. I don't think there's that many states of consciousness that humans could be in. Maybe like certain hallucinations, drugs, maybe deep meditations, sleep, and waking. There's not that many, but we experience sleep every night, that state. So I'm done rambling. I don't know what I was going to say now. Someone else can go.
All right. Thanks so much. Stifle, you can go right ahead just quickly.
Thank you. I just wanted to say goodbye, everyone. Thank you so much, and I hope you guys have a good day.
Thank you so much.
This has been fun. Look forward to listening to it. Cheers.
Amazing to
Bye.
have you with us.
Thank
Have a
you.
good rest of your
Thanks,
evening.
Grandpa.
All right then. And next up we have DJ with a short comment.
Cool. Yeah, so just wanted to follow up, and I'm gonna hit Skyfall now that he's gone. But responding to his comment, if I remember correctly, the first time I heard, or I think the first time state test was used, was by a guy named Charles Tart, and I've heard, and I've had this opinion myself in the past, that reality check is a bit of a misnomer because it assumes that you're already in reality, whereas a state check or state test is not making any assumptions. There's no assumptions in that term. So I think again, for me, it comes back to quality, and I just wanted to kind of quote LeBerge, my personal lucid dreaming saint, and he says in it's a lecture available on YouTube, and he says that dreaming is perception unconstrained by sensory input, and that perception is dreaming constrained by sensory input. So even LeBerge kind of has that little shade of waking life as a dream. I know a lot of people that are a little bit more strict in the scientific approach don't like that idea, or maybe some people don't like just thinking of life as a dream because it makes it seem like it's fake or whatever. But again, my final comment is just quality over quantity. If you're going to do a reality check or a state test, make sure that it's a quality. You're taking your time. You're really, really doing it the right way. Whether you're thinking about where you've been the last 15 minutes or flipping a light switch on and off or whatever it may be, the key there is really engaging in the moment and being there present and putting your energy into it. So quality over quantity. Thanks.
All right, thank you for that. MZ, you can go ahead with what you wanted to say a while ago, but yeah.
Yeah, so I've been having these thoughts through the course of the last couple of people speaking, so bear with me as I try to bring everything together in a way that makes sense and is coherent. But I was thinking, how can we synthesize what everyone is saying into like a core kind of takeaway beyond like the practicality of ensuring that we are doing things like with quality, besides like this is something you should be doing, this is not something you should be doing. Like if we want to really get to the core of what's fundamental with lucid dreaming, what everyone has been talking about, and I keep coming back to this research paper I read this morning, talking about this process that occurs in between linking of memories to kind of error check the thing. And everyone has really been talking about this process because what we've been doing, what we do when we practice lucid dreaming, when we do all of this stuff, fundamentally, we are changing the way we think, we are changing the way we process information, react to information, and ideally, we're doing this in a way that leads to kind of that expansion of consciousness I talked about earlier, that activation of areas of the brain that weren't previously active, engaging with the memory and the concepts and the ideas that our brain is currently going over, presenting to us as a dream in a way that goes beyond what non-lucid dreams afford us, which is more or less just an overview of thoughts and ideas versus a active participation with those thoughts and ideas. And kind of to go back to one of the first things I said about like the fundamentals of lucid dreaming, like all of that really comes down to like we have this awareness, this basic awareness of what's going on. Usually it's not a critical awareness. That critical awareness from what memory is presenting to us can lead then to lucidity, so long as we are present within the moment, so long as we have this sense of ourselves that is part of this whole thing, that we're experiencing, which leads us to that criticality that says, hey, I am here and something is happening, or I am noticing something, or some kind of process in my brain is firing that allows me to know, based on what I'm experiencing, which is memory, based on things I have remembered before, based on the things I have worked on, that I am in a dream, that what is happening around me is a product of my mind's experience. And I think that really gets to the heart. I think everyone has really been talking to kind of like that core fundamental process of like taking the notion of what's it called? This error testing, this reality testing, like all of that. And I do think it's fundamental. And I do think that the rest of it is too. I think I've made my point. At this point, I'm rambling.
No, actually, if I could just hop in, I really enjoyed what you said. It makes me think of perhaps simulation theory of dreams that, evolutionarily speaking, we dream in order to uh, run the simulation to ensure our survival during waking hours. And so, if it is some sort of error correction, it sounds like a type of memory consolidation from short term to long term, and what we deem important, if that makes sense at all.
Yeah. Also, yeah, Nightowl, you up next if you want to go ahead and just continue on the topics that you were thinking of.
I mean, I just was trying to follow that stream of consciousness. I'd love to read that article. Maybe you can provide it for us in the chat, MC. But error correction sounds like a very interesting theory. It also seems somewhat subjective. I'd love to learn more about it.
It's if I could jump in really quick.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, it's up on the chat, the internal chat. If someone wants to copy that over, I do it myself, but it's a little difficult in this space. um, that said, that's a small part of that overall study. It really does create like an entire breakdown and overview of the processes which lead to lucidity as we understand it. It's a framework. It's another conceptual framework that is interesting to use, but I'm not going to say it's like the end all be all of like what allows someone to become lucid. I just think it's important to note that training up these processes, like these individual processes to lead us towards lucidity is like a fundamental aspect of what we're doing here.
Great, thanks. All right, so this has been a great discussion. So does everyone have any like closing comments, conclusions, like personal conclusions, or like are you noticing like sort of differences in opinions or this or that? What do you think?
Believe in yourself.
That's a good one. Thanks for that. Anyone have anything else to add? Amina, you can go ahead.
Adding to that, don't give up and find what works for you.
Great. Night Owl, you can go ahead if you want to add something.
Yeah, I really like what DJ Dreams said about incubation as a springboard for your lucid dreaming practice. I think starting with your motivation and why you want to have lucid dreams is super important. So think about what you would do if you became lucid. Visualize that, um, and plan on having dreams surrounding that concept. And even if you don't become lucid, I think there's still plenty of value in that. So I'll just second that.
Great, thank you. I'm just going to go in the order of where people appear on my screen just to ask around. Mars, do you have any like concluding thoughts or additional comments?
No, it's all a work in progress.
All right, that's fine. Yeah, that's great. I mean, I definitely don't feel like this is like by any means like the end of the topic or anything. I'm just trying to like, sort of the end of the specific session to see where we've gotten so far, which is great. Red, do you have anything to add?
Nothing more to say, but it's been great.
Oh yeah, it's been amazing. Thank you so much for that addition. Liam, anything?
I think this has been really interesting, and I definitely would want to hear more about it. Though I'm like kind of not disappointed in a sense, but uh, perhaps that's the word for it. That it wasn't like a debate in a proper sense that people would be like interjecting over each other. This would lead to a more like cohesive like ambience. Not really ambience, but like atmosphere. Not atmosphere, but you know what I mean. It would be like more.
You're saying it would be better if we were all interjecting and
Yes.
cutting
Yeah,
each
and
other off?
fighting.
And screaming, and screaming over each other. Yes.
That sounds like, yeah.
I
Super.
disagree with
But-
that. I think the
I
moderator
mean,
thing
no.
was great.
Okay.
As the facilitator, this feels like a bit of a personal attack. No, I'm joking.
I think
Uh,
you did great.
Well, yeah, I mean, I feel like we didn't really have two conflicting opinions in this. I mean, I know that Sensei has some pretty strong opinions on this. So had he been able, Amina, I see you in the chat adding that even debates have some order. That's a good point.
yes.
I know that if Sensei had been here, things might have been a bit more, I suppose, heated could be the correct word, but that maybe some other day we could come back to this topic. I definitely think that we should, even though that massive range of topics we have yet to cover in this series of sessions, courses. Anyway, continuing, Philip, do you have anything to sort of conclude with, or?
Yeah, no, I just think it's best if we kind of just push through it, have like find the solution to everything, It's just that's the goal of everything,
Amazing, thanks so much. Does anyone else just want to like add like a? I mean, I was probably on the people who hadn't been talking at the time, but does anyone else want to go ahead and say anything left, or do we feel like that kind of ends the session? I'm MC, you can go ahead.
Yeah, I was just gonna tell people to go drink some water. Like, you've been here for a while. Like, get hydrated.
I've been drinking the whole time.
Hey, let's go.
Me too.
Don't
honestly.
be like me. Don't drink coffee this late, for sure.
Great. Good message. Good message to end with. All right. Well, I think that concludes the session. This has been amazing. I love everything that we got to talk about. I mean, 10 people at once on the stage is more than I could have ever hoped for. I mean, I feel like we've advanced a lot from having, well, the last session was really good because we got through a lot on the topic of wild, which, by the way, is available to listen back to. Except this one, I feel like we really had a different sort of nice, fluid, flowing structure and stuff. So I guess this is like a segue into like the Q&A section. I was about to say goodbye, but then I remembered the Q&A existed. That was slightly awkward. But anyway, I feel like that was pretty good.
Yeah, I can show the comments too.
Oh yeah, that would be perfect. I was just thinking like, how do I?
I'll put them up.
Great.
I can read it all out if you want. Or
Yeah, you can read it out if you want to. You can go ahead if you want.
So Titan said, I wanted to ask you how you discern sort of the levels of lucid dreams, because once I thought I was lucid, but now looking back on it, I think that it was actually just a dream that I was aware of having. And I asked him for some clarification in the chat. I said, were you aware of the fact that you were in a dream while it was happening? And he said, yes, pretty much. So I gave him my perspective, so I'll let y'all answer.
I have a story on that, actually. A dream, if you don't mind.
Sure, go ahead, I think.
Yeah, so I'll give you an example of what Ed Kellogg might call a sublucid or a pre-lucid. So you can look at different criteria, but here's a dream. So I have a common dream sign. I'm on a ferry in near Seattle. They have ferries for cars, and it's a common dream sign for me. So I'm on the ferry, and there's this big old toolbox with these giant, like almost comical looking toy hammers. I'm thinking to myself, I've never seen that before on here. That's weird. They must be doing maintenance. But why are the tools so big? oh, these must just be tools that I've never seen before. So I use that as an example a lot because it's a perfect example of something unusual happening in the dream that you would like to trigger lucidity, but instead dream logic kicks in and it fills in the blanks. And our mind is so powerful, it can fill in the blanks even before your question comes up. So when you're talking about levels of lucidity, I think any aspect of self-awareness is something to pay attention to value, and to utilize for future dreams. So what I'll do is, if I have that come up in my dreams, the next night I'm going to visualize that dream, and I'm going to visualize what would happen if I had become lucid. It's basically the mild technique in a sense. So there's a lot of ways you could split it. There's a lot of ways you can break down levels of lucidity, but that's how I think of it. It's aspects of self-awareness, and there's obviously levels, but I would just emphasize value even the tiniest shred of lucidity, and it's almost like a snowball, right? You've got that little piece, and then you just roll it forward to the next day, roll it forward to the next day, and keep that momentum going.
Okay, I just wanted to say really quick that is definitely an M word that I forgot to incorporate into my little mnemonic. Momentum is so big. Thank you for mentioning that.
All right, thank you. Does anyone else have like something that they want to add to answer this person's question, or in comment of what DJ said if you want to?
I love what Mars said earlier, and I said this in the chat, but I'll just say it out loud. I love what you said about making your own scale, because I'm a big advocate for like building your own practice. And even though there's like, some kind of like ways that people define things specifically, I still think that like everyone has their own definition for what they consider lucid. And I think that's okay, But at the very basic level, if you knew you were in a dream while it was happening, I mean, that sounds like lucidity for me.
Right, perfect. Anyone else have anything? Or do we feel like that question got answered?
I will say that I've had a lot of experiences where I have a lucid dream, and then within 10 minutes of waking up from it, I'm like, wow, was that lucid? And I know that it was lucid. It just some quality like collapses, and I'm like, it felt like a regular dream. But I think just trusting that moment when you wake up and you're like, oh, I had a lucid dream, just trust that. It might, like, your memory of it might fade, but that initial feeling of lucidity is more important.
Cool. Should I put in the next question?
Yeah, go right ahead.
Okay, this one's kind of funny. Are lucid dreams real life?
Yes.
Yep.
Yes.
100%.
Back the world
Don't
around
believe
you.
them. No, they're not.
Yes.
Don't
Everything
spread
is real life.
misinformation on the internet,
like-
guys. We don't
okay,
allow that on the
okay.
Lucid
If you're
Dream
in a dream-
Initiative channel.
If you're in a dream and you wish that you have $1 billion, you are going to receive $1 billion in your bank account in real life. This is real, chat. This is
The power
real.
of manifestation. Liam
Yes.
teaching
I did
us
talk
the
to somebody
secrets
that
of
did that.
manifestation. Oh my. Okay.
That's funny. Yeah, long story short, they are real. It's funny when people say, are lucid dreams real? Because, yeah, I mean, they're proven. We do them. You're talking to a bunch of lucid dreamers. But they are dreams. And that is also a real thing. So it's kind of a funny question. But, yeah. I think that's all the ones in the chat that I can see.
I can
Can I
add a
talk to
little
that?
bit.
Well,
Oh,
yeah.
yeah, go ahead, Ms.
Okay,
Ika.
DJ. Okay, yeah. I was just gonna say, like, this goes back to the memory thing, right? When you, at least when I remember a lucid dream, the memory of it is like about as equivalent as a real life memory. So as far as I'm concerned, those experiences are as real as any other. Like, sure, they happened in a dream, but like, they felt pretty real when they were happening.
Yeah, and they have a real impact on our psyche and our mood, and just like memories do. So yeah, 100%.
And
Yeah,
I'd just like to add,
yeah.
I'm sorry, just quickly,
No
like,
worries.
this is why I don't like the idea of like reality check, because that implies that dreams don't really exist, or that they're not like real phenomena, or as like a real state to be in. And also, it's been scientifically proven, and apparently, so according to, I think it was Daniel Love, who I happened to read this conversation happening in, which server was it? I don't remember. But the like April 12th is supposed to be the like lucid dreaming day, because that's the day that it was scientifically proven for the first time, according, I think, to Daniel Love, but I don't really know. Anyway, so I'm sorry to interrupt. You can go right ahead.
No. Yeah, I think he's talking about Keith Heron, because a lot of people think that Stephen LaBerge was the one who initially verified lucid dreaming via the eye movement test, but it was actually a guy named Keith Heron, and you can read all of. Oh, I mean, you could read. Well, no, Keith Heron made his freely available online, his doctoral thesis. LaBerge's you have to buy. Well, I mean, I think it's worth it, but I collect these things, so. But I wanted to say, like, is a lucid dream real life? Like, this statement may not make sense, but I really like it. When LaBerge says, dreaming is perception unconstrained by sensory input. And so we have these sense organs that bring all this information in when we're awake. As we fall asleep, the thalamus, which processes and distributes that information, shuts down. We know that in rooms that are like totally, like a soundless room, if there's no sensory input, your brain starts just like creating stuff, filling it in. Obviously, dreams are a little bit more complex than that, and there's some really interesting theories out there surrounding all that. But I would think of lucid dreams as it's you, and it's just you playing out as you're asleep, and that can be kind of a weird thing, because it's such a powerful experience. But it's definitely changed me. I mean, I learned how to lucid dream when I was just a kid, like 6 years old, and I mean, it was really, really good for me. Just like so for me, it was like, it was very much real for me, and always has been.
That's nice. Great to hear. Anyone else want? All right. Yeah, sure. We can move on to
Oh,
the
sorry.
next question. Do you want to read it out?
Yeah, what differentiates current waking reality from any other dreaming status?
I think DJ already answered this. If you want to repeat yourself, DJ.
Yeah, it does go back to, like, what is perception? What we're not seeing reality as it is. Our eyes only see a sliver of the light spectrum. Our ears only hear a sliver of the sound spectrum, and so on and so on. This is why we have science, so that we can use instruments to broaden our awareness of the world around us. And so, what differentiates waking reality from your dreaming reality, in my opinion, is your perception of it, and how you're experiencing it. There's always going to be some kind of contrast, except in maybe those cases that are mostly rare, where the dream is just so real, as sometimes realer than real, where you just can't. It's that line where it's like, I woke up and I couldn't tell if I was me dreaming that I was a butterfly, or if I was a butterfly, if I'm a butterfly dreaming that I'm a person, you know, where you start to kind of wonder, you lose that sense of concrete groundedness, like this is real and that other thing is not real. So it's that, and there's I mean, you know, centuries of philosophers talking about what is real and what is reality. But I mean, yeah, I don't think I can answer that question definitively. But I think it's important to figure it out, like for you, what is differentiating between waking reality and the dream, because that's going to help you become lucid a lot more.
Yeah, I'd just like to jump in here. Like, I recently was having a conversation with my cousin. I'll now have to make him listen to this for fun. But it was basically just a question of like, how do you know that the reality you're living in is real? And so basically what I was trying to convince him of, or like tell him or explain to him, is that in my opinion it's like, you know, you have no idea of telling which reality is real or what's real, or even if like things are in the same reality or in different realities or all of that. So first of all, it doesn't really matter because it doesn't exactly affect anything. Like, I mean, it can affect something if you want it to affect something, but my point was that like the fact that it's a concept makes it so that like the fact that it's just something in your mind, reality is like not an actual thing that can be proven. So reality can essentially be whatever you want it to be. In general, I was sort of explaining this like not in the context of dreams, we were just having a philosophical discussion, but it definitely applies to dreams as well, that reality, if it is like almost like a title that you can give to whatever you want to give, and it's like it doesn't necessarily hold anything, it just holds any meaning that you give it, basically. Right, does anyone have any other comments? Or we can move on to the... All right, yeah, you can go.
I was just thinking about the when we were talking about reality checks as well, the word reality. I like the term reality check. I'm not checking that I'm in reality. I'm checking like which reality, what the quality of reality is that I'm experiencing. Reality is dreaming when I'm in a dream. So waking reality, I think, is a cool term in that question. That's all.
What one other like maybe golden nugget for those people out there, I like to, when I'm visualizing a dream, I like to imagine that I'm asleep in my bed as I'm doing it, like the visualization. I don't know why it works, but it just works for me. My brain questions things a lot, so I feel like when I visualize, it's almost like just floating in nothingness. But for whatever reason, if I kind of ground that in the fact that I'll be laying in my bed, that's where I will be, that's what I'll be doing, and then that'll, you know, the dream will be happening as I'm laying in bed. That seems to help, and that kind of speaks to the differentiating between waking and dreaming. Even though in this waking life I'll be laying in bed, you know, motionless, I'll actually be dreaming and doing all this crazy stuff.
Yeah, that's cool. MC, you can go right ahead.
Yeah, I was looking at the comments and I'm not seeing too many other questions. So do you mind if like I ask everyone on the panel kind of a question here?
Sure.
If we have questions?
Sure.
No, yeah, I have a question for everyone on the panel.
Oh, right, no, go ahead. Sorry, I misheard that.
Okay, yeah. Going into this conversation, is there anything that you kind of wanted to cover or say that you didn't get to during the course of the convo?
I mean, in my specific case, I was like thinking of talking about I just don't really know whether or not we got to it completely or not in my specific case, but I was sort of thinking of like stuff to do with based on whatever fundamentals we see of lucid dreaming. Like if we could decide on what the fundamentals are, how does that actually affect people's practice and techniques? And I mean, like, you know, the stuff that people have to actually do to lucid dream, because I don't remember too much about this, so I was like trying to think of whether or not to bring this up because it's like opening a whole can of worms. But like at the same time, it's I think Sensei was talking about how if memory really is like one of the only like fundamental aspects of lucid dreaming and memory alone, is that going to make it so that we have to have a memory-based practice, which I believe was sort of something that he was talking about a bit, like just completely making everything aimed at increasing, like everything just changed for the perspective of memory specifically. I don't really know if that made any sense or how much we covered that, but like that was something going through my head if people wanted to comment, but I don't really mind if we go over it or not. Does anyone have anything to say on that or something else?
I definitely want
bring
to
up?
hear like other people's like what they wanted to bring to the table, but I think that's a really good thought and a really good question.
I don't know if I think it really depends on who you are as a person. What, like, if knowing fundamentals and figuring out that back end kind of stuff is going to affect you in your whole process. I'm sure some people don't even have to think about the fundamentals because of the way their brain works. Like, they're just like, I'm gonna do this tech and that works, and I don't care what makes it work. That's fine. It works for me. But like, especially I'm thinking about memory more and how memory is quote unquote everything, but I'm still doing something that looks like a critical state test. It's just how I define it. So that might answer your question a little bit, Crystal.
I've
Yeah. DJ,
I've
go
kind
ahead.
of I've argued with Sensei a little bit on this, and I think the reason why he's strong on memory is because, you know, he's strong on recall, and if you talk to him, he'll say that, you know, recall is the most important thing for lucid dreaming practice, and I've argued with him on that a lot because I just don't find that to be true for myself. But it you know, I should say the way I see things is that you know, we're not all different, but we all approach things um, in different ways, or we fall into different groupings in a way, in the way that we approach things and what works for us. So, you know, for myself, um, I learned a lot from lucid dreaming when I was a kid, and when I was an adult, I tried to not synthesize, but kind of create a conceptual framework for myself. And so what I created was awareness, intention, expectation, willpower slash motivation, and confidence slash positivity. So I created a kind of framework for myself, and it's one that I think works for everybody, because I think you can get a lucid dream any one of those ways. But for most people, like, they have a strength in one of those areas, or they have strengths in a couple of those areas, and then they're weak in a couple other areas. And over time, you can kind of play to your strengths, but also improve your weaknesses. So there's no one size fits all, and that's the thing. It's one thing I do like to advocate, not focusing so much on mild, because I think it's a great technique, but it's also a cognitive technique. And I think, you know, what I've seen in the lucid dreaming community is that a lot of people struggle with cognitive techniques. They struggle bringing it into a concrete exercise and a concrete practice that they feel is working. A lot of times people try these cognitive exercises, and for weeks or months, they don't even know if it's working or not. They can't even recognize if it's working or not. So I think it's important for people to realize that different approaches might work for them better, and there isn't just one approach. There are a number of approaches. I would encourage people to not just talk to people in the lucid dreaming community, which is great, but also talk to, we have a great tool now called artificial intelligence, Bing, Bard, ChatGPT. Start asking them questions about, okay, there's cognitive techniques, but list me 10 techniques that are not cognitive techniques. So, kind of answering those, Crystal, your question and Mizik's at the same time. I think if there's one thing I could share with people, it's that, you know, trust yourself, first of all, and approach lucid dreaming with a sense of play rather than as an equation in which you enter the right variables and you get the right results. Think of it as play. You're exploring, you're learning about yourself. I know people, they want to get into lucid dream real quick and have the experience they want to have. But if you're missing some aspects of, the ability to know how your intention works, or the ability to know how to exercise your willpower, you're going to burn out. It's going to suck. So, yeah, definitely approach it with a sense of play.
I think that's some great words of wisdom. Thanks for that. Liam, you can go right ahead.
Yeah. I have just a slight disagreement with something that you said, DJ. It's about using like artificial intelligence to get advice. It can like often come up with a lot of misinformed things or like just misleading advice. But more importantly, it like depersonalizes the experience, and you can't really get anecdotes from it. Um, I'm an advocate of like artificial intelligence, but I don't think it should be used in those kinds of things. That's all.
Well, I created an AI bot for our Discord server, so I'm on that side of it. Obviously there's misinformation there, but I think I think it can be a great way to explore. Like if
used
you
responsibly.
yeah, I mean, if you look up mild, it's not going to tell you the right mild. It's not going to give you LaBerge's actual mild. So it leaves out dream signs.
Probably not more or less than another user. Like people can be misinformative and are misinformative on Discord all the time. Other real people.
Yeah, I guess it's that trust aspect, right? You say, oh, it's artificial intelligence. It's must be super smart, and it can be just as wrong as anything else.
All right, thanks for that. Next we have, I think, me. I raised my hand. I'd just like to say on the topic of AI and stuff, AI is often sort of related to dream interpretation, which is often like AI can supposedly do it. Dream interpretation, I believe, is never something which anyone else can do for you. It's only something that you can do for yourself. I'm very strong on that. I just wanted to sort of like throw that in because it's like, oh, I saw a snake in my dream, and then someone else tells you, oh, that means that like something venomous is in your life or something, like that does not make sense. It can be positive, it can be negative, but like in my specific case, it's like you are the only person who can interpret what your own dreams mean, because you can think to yourself, that snake means, because I really like snakes and I've been thinking about them a lot, it appeared because I associate that type of grass with snakes appearing there. That's the stuff which goes on usually. And you can be like, this tells me something about my life, but it's you who has to say that. And it could be, oh, it's a snake, which means that something venomous is happening in my life. You can go on and on about that. Yes, snake, :3. And so it's not, in my opinion, a good idea to let AI do stuff like that for you. I think AI can sometimes be useful if you train it like basically perfectly, but I feel like human intuition can't really be as in sort of techniques and stuff, that's what I'm talking about. But human intuition generally is better, except at the same time, I feel like a lot of us sort of, I can say in Dream Cafe especially, you know, things kind of get repetitive. Let's just say it. Let's just put it like that in terms of dream guiding and going, you know, like saying the same things to tons of people over and over again. And you may as well use an AI for that if you're just going to say, you know, here's how you do mild or something. But personally, I feel like, first of all, AI tends to take away from your interaction with real people. And second of all, I just don't like trusting AI with stuff. I'd also like to add, just on an alternative note, giving dreams to AI to make a picture out of them, or like to AI generate an image, is also something that I personally don't like the idea of, because I've heard stories of people like having to try tons and tons and tons to get an accurate image of their dream guide. And so I feel like in doing that, you might not only warp your own perception of the dream guide, like your own memory of your dream guide, by seeing so many sort of like similar images that aren't quite the same, or you could end up basically with something not quite right, or just, you know, it's like you're trying to get something else again to do something which only you can do because it's a part of your mind. So again, I feel like if you're going to try and bring your dream guide, for example, to reality, then you'd want to do that by drawing them yourself. That's just kind of the way that I go about some of this stuff, because that's what comes to mind when AI gets talked about. I feel like AI is very closely linked in terms of lucid dreaming, of like with these ideas of like interpretation or generating images and stuff like that, which is not something that I'm really in favor of. Except if you want to have fun with it, go ahead. But as well, in terms of information, it doesn't always seem the best either. Personally, I really enjoy reading through actual guides written by people, so that you can see all of their different perspectives and sort of individual like views on specific techniques and their different variations on the techniques. For example, if I was learning mild, I'd look at the original LaBerge, of course. I might look at Stifles. I might look at Lamage's. I might look at my own. But you know, it's like, you know, you're getting all of these perspectives. You're looking at the original. You're looking at this, that. I feel like AI can be useful in some circumstances, but generally, I don't really look at it positively, especially as it's really difficult to sort of train it with some stuff. Anyway, sorry, that kind of got long. I started rambling a bit. Who raised their hand first? I think we had Night Owl, who wanted to comment on this, but he is not currently in because I think he has some funny connection. As in like, let me see. Okay. Night Owl, are you here?
Sorry, my audio quality is probably dropped off, but can you hear me?
Don't worry, you can go ahead if you want.
Yep.
Yeah, I just wanted to say AI is coming, guys. It's either gonna leave us in the dust or, you know, take us along for the ride. I feel as if, regardless of how we feel about it, it is going to change a lot of industries. And the best case scenario, in my opinion, is to integrate with AI and become cyborgs. No, but seriously, human training is what distinguishes a good AI model from, you know, something superficial. So I really think that it can be used almost as like a training tool to empower you with the skills you need in order to analyze your own dreams. There is a lot of intuition that comes with that. And like you mentioned, Crystal, I agree wholeheartedly that only the dreamer knows the key to unlocking their own subconscious. But I feel like AI could be somewhat of a useful tool. And a lot of what you mentioned has its merits. AI may very well take away from genuine human interaction. And maybe the people who know us best would be best equipped to discuss our dreams with and decipher their meanings. So that's just my 2 cents.
Great, thanks so much for that. Philip, you can go ahead.
Yeah, I just wanted to say that I definitely agree with you on the part with depictions having a big influence on things like dream guides. I mean, at this point, it's impossible to get one straight depiction of a character in a dream if you have multiple depictions of them. AI, like you said, definitely messes with that, but I think it can be said just in general.
Yeah, great, thanks. No one has raised their hand, so I'll just add one. Oh, Liam, you just did, but I'll just add one comment to what's just been said, which is that as to what Night Owl said, I'm not saying that AI isn't coming. In fact, I'd say it's here pretty much. But what I'm saying is for dreams specifically, I'm not actually saying anything in terms of AI in general. I'm just talking specifically dreams. I wouldn't really you can play around with it and you can try and do stuff with it. But in terms of interpretation and stuff like that, I personally don't really feel like you should really believe it too much in that sense. And although consuming content on how to interpret your dreams is a good point that I didn't really consider, how to try and understand your dreams, I think that is really important. Although again, personally, I'd prefer reading actual guides rather than asking AI and getting a smaller, shorter, sort of more concise, but response taken from tons of different sources, because I like sort of the individual personality of each guide that you'll be getting, and essentially. Liam, you can go ahead and then we might take some more questions, maybe. It depends where this goes. But Liam, you can go.
Yes. Specifically on AI generation of dream guide images, or just images from your dream. I was just about to point out that dreams, even in dreams, your like perception of the characters aren't gonna really be the same, consistent for sometimes. You're gonna have the the persons you might be interacting with in the dreams might change a bit around, and it would really mess with your memory of it too. Um, so you also you distort your perception of the dream, even upon waking up, and forgetting some details. I think people really lose some details that were kind of important, and end up having a distorted view on their dreams, just right after waking up. Just saying. Also, tell me if you guys disagree or whatever. I'd really like to hear your responses.
Okay, great, thanks. Do we have anything to add on this AI topic? Not everyone has. Yeah. MZ, go ahead. Oh, wait, I totally misunderstood what you said I didn't realize that you raised your hand. I thought you meant something else. Anyway, go ahead.
Yeah. I think it's really important to keep this context in mind when we're talking about this current crop of AI, which are really large language models. These are essentially, if you want to think about how these things work in a really reductionist way, imagine you're rolling a dice, except the dice is weighted in a really clever way. And that clever way it's been weighted is based on all of the information that it has available to it. I think we all know how much misinformation is out there on the internet, and how many kind of different dream interpretation kind of guides are out there. And what these things are doing are saying, okay, so let's take a gross sum of all of these different things, and then as we create and go over each token, as we generate these words, which one makes sense to go next based on which one went next in all of these other cases. So it's very random, but it's random. It is literally statistically random what this thing generates, but it does so in a more guided way. And then I think someone was saying with like human training, yeah, there are definitely ways to kind of push the die in one way or the other. Technique matters. Just that context is important. Like we're not dealing with necessarily like thinking objects here. Like yes, a lot of information is going between different kind of pathways and whatever, and there's a question there of whether that constitutes any kind of consciousness. But until we get some of these more generalized approaches to kind of, dealing with information, this thing is pretty much just going to regurgitate what's out there, unless you're very specific about how you train it. Which, I think what DJ's done with the Morpheus bot over on OmniLucid is like a good example of something that can produce somewhat clever seeming results if it has very pointed information. I think there's definitely more work to be done there as far as like contextual, like memory based things. I think you wanted to like have it personalized to each individual, which would be really neat because then it can actually bring in that individual approach for each person. But yes, important context. We are rolling dice with this.
Nice point there. Does anyone else want to interject on the AI topic? Or we can conclude it and we can move on to some questions from the chat if you want to go ahead, I suppose. Yeah, if you want to go ahead, Amina.
In what other ways than writing your dreams down can you improve dream recall?
Who wants to start with this? Just, I mean, I feel like there's a lot we could go on about, but we can just stick to the basics if we want to. I know that.
Yeah, for the sake of time, we can just give some bullet pointers.
Number one, love dreaming is like the best advice I can give people who want to get into this. It's the more you think about your dreams, not because you're like, oh, if I think about my dreams, maybe I'll remember. Like, dreaming is really cool. And if you can figure out a way to understand that and like find your way into it as a fascination, then you're going to have a lot more dreams because you're thinking about them, not for any specific reason, just because they're fucking cool.
Yeah, I think that's definitely a very, very like a really important point to get across. Like it should be forefront of the lucid dreaming sort of like what we're saying, because lucid dreaming, I like what I read one time, which was that lucid dreaming is a practice of dreaming. So you have to really put importance on your dreams themselves rather than sort of leaving them behind to try and get these sort of better dreams or something that you're dreaming of or whatever. I can just like lay out the really basics just because like I know everyone here has probably said it like a million times. Dream delving. Does anyone want to like go over that really fast? Feel like they're strong in like just doing it really quickly?
Yeah.
I'd be down to it.
Go ahead.
Dream delving is a method of actively recalling dreams centered upon immediate actions taken upon waking. Okay, I'm not gonna like the copy pasta way. No, it's simply like basically you're like waking up from a like dream, and then you think about what you last dreamed about, and you try to backtrack from there. Like,
yeah,
for example, you like dreamt about being at the farm, then there's a cow, and like you see it and you say hi to it. Well, you might like only remember the part where you say hi, but you might just by like thinking about that part and backtracking. I think that wasn't really a good example, but
That
I'm
was
gonna
the best
just continue
example of
with,
all time.
and by remembering you saying hi to the cow, you're gonna remember that there's a cow and that you were at the farm, and then that before that you were eating donuts on the car with your dad on a plane because the car is on the plane and you're actually on a roller coaster to the moon, and the moon's fake and it's made out of cheese, and the cheese is all made out of the cow that is eating the cheese.
Yeah. Can I add to that too?
Round of applause.
Yes.
And also staying completely still is pretty important. Your body position is linked to the memory of the dream. So not moving when you first wake up and allowing that thread to kind of start pulling itself, like he said, starting with the last thing you remember and then building on that.
I'd like to add
Yes.
that Stifle, I think specifically, or just in general, says that once you feel like you've gotten enough from one specific, from Leo just saying cow like the Discord member, yeah, cow reference. From once you feel like you've gotten enough, like all that you can get of a specific dream from a specific position, Stifle recommends like turning over to another position that you may have been like sleeping in before, and then you might be able to recall more or like of a different dream if you move to a different position. But sort of the emphasis here is just to sort of tell it all pretty concisely. As soon as you wake up, what you should do is you should lay still in the position that you woke. Quickly turn off your alarm if you need to, then go back to the exact position that you woke, and then think about what was I just doing, thinking, feeling, smelling, hearing. Pay attention to everything and try and sort of recall any fragments, memories that might come from that, and then go backwards from that point. Like if you're remembering one specific image, like Liam's example of saying hi to the cow, right? Then you can try and move backwards and try and remember more. I think that's basically the idea. And then once you feel like you've gotten it all, it's a good idea to like try and journal it in as much detail as you can. This kind of feeds into the fact that you should be journaling for at least 20 minutes a day is ideal. But the more the better, but you can take it as far as you want. Don't lose your sanity. But you can also turn over before journaling to try and get pieces of other dreams in positions you may have been sleeping in. And then just to quickly go over other things is that you can reread your journal before bed or anytime during the day, or try and recall your dream during the day without rereading it. Go through it throughout the day before bed, and you can re-journal. If you don't remember anything, you should journal a dream that you've had before, even if it wasn't from last night, so that you're still journaling for that like goal of like 20 minutes or something, ideally, so that your recall doesn't go down from one specific day, even if you don't recall much on that specific day, and you should generate intent before you sleep to try to remember your dreams. You can do this like probably by rereading your dreams and placing importance on your dreams, and as was mentioned previously, like really loving your dreams and enjoying them is super important anyway, so that's going to help a lot. Anyway, I started rambling. I just wanted to go over some stuff quickly. And okay, MZ, you can go ahead first.
Okay. So going back to delving for a second, it's really interesting, right? You've got this sense of proprioception tied to memory. You've got this like awareness of what happened next and going backwards and what have you. But what I think might spice it up a little bit, make it into like a full-fledged technique once you've got like the basics down. Stay still, work backwards through a dream step by step. As you're going step by step, consider if it made sense from one thing to transition into the other. I think you might find you'll get some interesting results.
That is a new one, actually, to me. Somehow that is a new one. I love that. I'm going to do that myself, actually. That's good. Who was... Oh, DJ, you can go ahead.
Yeah, so I have I think I may have deleted it now, but I have this thing on doing a mental dream journal because I hate dream journaling. So I try to get to the point where I don't have to record my dreams anymore as soon as possible when I'm practicing. So what I'll do is the main aspect of that practice is before you go to sleep at night, recalling the events of your day and recalling previous dreams, focusing particularly on something that is significant to you, and recalling it in as much detail as you possibly can. So I see it as kind of like a exercising your memory muscle before you go to sleep. And it's a technique that I used to do when I was a kid. A lot of my stuff I did as a kid, and then tried all the techniques, and then went back to what I was doing when I was a kid. It's also something I've found in a couple spiritual traditions, Tibetan, Kabbalah. They also in those kind of practices they recommend that as well. So the really important thing there is not quantity. You don't want to just... It's not about recalling everything. It's about recalling something that is significant, especially if it's emotional, because memory is most effective when it comes to emotions. So that's a little trick you can use. I've tried to get people to use that, and it seems to work for some people. It works with your daytime memories and your dreaming memories. If you don't have a bunch of dream memories, use your day memories and so on. So yeah, it's worth a shot.
That's a good... Yeah. That's a good point. That's a good
Uh,
recommendation. Thank you.
Can I interject really fast, really fast? I just want to talk.
Yeah, sure, go ahead.
Okay, so I'm not going to, but I just think it would be so cool to talk about emotional awareness and kind of bringing emotions into this conversation as like a fundamental aspect of like lucid dreaming. Um, it's it's more important than I think a lot of people kind of think or kind of get to with a lot of these discussions. Some other time though. I'm just really happy DJ brought that up.
It's a deep subject.
Now that I think about it, I think that's probably a good idea. I mean, as you say, like some other discussion should be good. I feel like this could fit into a discussion that we could potentially have about sort of mindset, emotions, consistency problems that have like the majority of the community has, like because that's something which is seldom talked about, even though it's like the major problem that most people have. I feel like that could potentially be a deep dive. So that's little teaser for potentially next time. I don't know.
I think it's even deeper than that, though. I think it is like a fundamental part about how we process this information and how we come to the conclusion that we're dreaming in the first place, or can more easily and more readily come to the conclusion that we're dreaming in the first place. But yeah, something we can touch on some other time.
Yeah, I could see that definitely as well. All of that coming into play together. I just meant like, it could fit with some of these other topics if you were to like just frame all of that with emotions. But yeah, that's a great idea. I'll note that one down. Great, thanks. Does anyone else want to like say something in regards to the question or what we just said? I feel like we could go on and on about emotions now, but we probably shouldn't. So we can do that some other time.
Yeah, there's one other thing in terms of what can you do to improve your recall, and that is do some kind of physical action, whether that's drinking a particular tea before you go to sleep, even if it doesn't help. Putting your dream journal underneath your pillow, doing some kind of physical action. It solidifies your intention. So I think it can be important to, I use almost exclusively cognitive techniques, but I'm always advocating for getting outside of that paradigm, I guess, and exploring other ways. Explore the ways of intention, how we establish intention. We can use any aspect of our environment to create an intention and follow through on it. So think big, get creative.
Oreos sound good. Anyone up for some Oreos before bed? That's a callback to the Oreos induced lucid dream, which kind of touches on this idea of like using objects to kind of build associations. Yeah.
Mild sauce.
Mild sauce.
Oh
Let's
yeah.
go.
Mild sauce.
I have
Le
to hop
burger.
in a
Le
minute.
burger. Sorry, what was that?
I was just saying I have to hop off in a minute, but there's one more question. I can just pin it real quick and then.
Yeah, that would be great. Thanks. I think we should just absolutely speed run this last question. We've been taking a long time, I
Quite
suppose.
a difficult one. Well, I mean, it could be deep, but I don't know. I don't have an answer for it. So the question is, it's a two-part question. If you dreamed about dying, what happened? And the other part of that being, are there any studies about brain activity during these kinds of dreams? Which I don't know about that, but I will say really quickly that I've had so many dreams of dying. Some were horrifying and some were very peaceful, where I was just like a ghost, basically. So yeah, it's interesting, but I'll end that there. I have to hop off and I'll let everybody else close out. So thank you.
Let's just all answer at once.
Yeah, go ahead.
I've dreamed of dying once or twice. It was really no big deal. I didn't really feel anything of it. Like, I didn't make anything of it. What did you feel and saw dying in the dream? For me, it was more like meditation state, silence and peace and confidence. Well, for me, it was kind of just waking up. But like, I expected like an awakening, and that's like what directed the results. But I guess it would be different for all people.
Okay, thanks. MZ, go ahead.
Sure. I'll address the second question part of it first. I'm not aware of any studies that have looked at that specific type of dream. DJ might know better than I do on that front. As for actual experiences, if I'm lucid, what usually ends up happening is I will either reverse time, redo the situation, heal it up, and just continue from that point. In the past, in non-lucids, there's been some kind of like shift or dream scene change. One particular instance where like I went into a black hole that was very peaceful. That was very nice. I did that intentionally with the intention of like going into a black hole and dying. I think it was a challenge on Dream Views like ages ago. Yeah. So very different kind of outcomes.
Yeah. Thanks. Does anyone wait? Did we answer the second question too, or were we just on the first
I did
one?
speak to that. I'm not aware of any kind of studies, but DJ has read far more studies than I have, I think, and retained more of that information. So,
DJ, do you just want to like? Yeah.
My first response was to go to Google Scholar and try to find something. But yeah, I haven't honestly read a lot on this. It's kind of a crossover area in lucid dreaming. You're going to get more into like spiritual aspects, near-death experiences, stuff like that. So it would be a little bit difficult to kind of parse out the data there. Like, is there studies about brain activity during death dreams? I have no idea. I think there's probably there's definitely a number of studies on dreams about death, but about brain activity, I mean, you'd probably have the same brain activity as any other dream.
it's a hard thing to capture too, like the qualitative aspects with the quantitative things that we can measure, because what we can measure is fairly limited.
Yeah, you might get like some increased like heart rate and maybe some some fear going on there and some like neurological correlates to that, but the research is so early on all this stuff. I've like so personally, my personal experience with these kind of dreams is I don't usually dream of death or dying, but I did a lot when I was a kid, and it was kind of a part of a progression um, from nightmares and night terrors, and that's kind of how I actually ended up overcoming all those with lucid dreaming. That's I mentioned earlier how important it was at that time, so I like was able to do that, and actually I think Dr. Kristen Lamarca is doing a lot of really important work on PTSD and how to apply lucid dreaming to that. It can be completely transformative. I would have dreams of dying constantly in dozens of different ways. And then I'd have lucid dreams where I couldn't wake up from them. So I'd be lucid, but I couldn't wake up, and I would be getting tortured or dying in some way, right? People don't want to hear that, but like I think I might be like one of 3 people, and I've met probably hundreds of people online in lucid dreaming. So it's extremely rare, and it's usually linked to some kind of extreme trauma. So unless you have that in your life, you're probably good to go. Do you saw any dying in the dream? I mean, I used to kill myself in dreams on purpose to avoid pain until the killing myself didn't work anymore. And I ended up just wanting to die for real and just accept like, okay, I'm gonna die. Like I'm saying goodbye to my family. I'm dying. This is it. I had like this breakthrough. Um, and after that, like a bunch of stuff started happening and getting lucid all the time. But that's sort of a little bit different. Um, I think if you're dreaming about dying and stuff like that on a regular basis, for me, the important thing was to know that it's a dream and accept it. And just know that it's a dream and it's going to end. And even if you can't wake up right now, you will wake up. And so it's important to remain centered on that awareness rather than, it's super easy to get carried away by the emotions or the pain or whatever. But it's important to focus on that. So maybe that's going a little bit into the deep waters, but yeah, that's my take.
All right, thanks for that. Okay then. I don't think we have anyone else with their hand raised, I don't believe. And I don't believe we have any other questions, do we? So I think it's time to conclude, right? Does anyone have any final thoughts, just quickly to like go over? I'm sure that like in terms of technical stuff, we can always talk to one another, but in terms of like the topic.
Thanks for putting it together.
Me? Well, I don't know. I'm so happy that we managed to like do this. This is my favorite lucid deep dive or lucid journey that I've done so far. It's just been so fun to have so many different people and different perspectives. It's been amazing for me. So and I'm really glad that you all managed to come and we had this amazing discussion, and I'm happy that we managed to get some viewers, and hopefully we were able to educate or even just educate one another. So I suppose that's it. Does anyone else want to say anything? And thank you to everyone. Oh, thank you to Amina for like hosting, and also thank you to Night Owl for hosting, and MZ for helping out with the technical stuff, and everyone for just generally being being around, helping out, being supportive, and the talking and the discussion was amazing. So thank you for everyone for sharing their opinions and helping out with the advertising. And I know I could go on, but there you go.
I think this was great, and I want to like see more of it like in the coming weeks. So I'm excited for the next one.
We will do this like once a month, I think, as usual. Anyway, I think that's it. Probably. Does anyone else want to say anything, or should we just bid farewell and end the stream? However, that's possible. I mean, I think you're in control, right? I don't know, or is it Night Owl still?
We're stuck here forever.
Oh,
no.
Why are we still here just to suffer?
All right then. Okay. Well, Amina seems to have control. So okay. Well, thank you everyone. It's been amazing. We're gonna do it again in a month. We get to have all of the planning we want. You can end the live stream if you want to.
Cool.